Have you ever felt like a ghost in your own life, walking through rooms that were once yours, now occupied by strangers and painful memories? What if you were given the chance to not just reclaim that space, but to burn down the old story and build something new, something true, from the ashes? This is a story about that chance. The night the river looked like poured black glass, Mira stepped back into the mansion that had once been her life. She found her ex-husband, Crit Radanakarn, parading a woman through the gallery like a prize greyhound. Cameras blinked. Crystal laughed. Crit's hand fit the small of the woman's back with a proprietary ease that used to belong to Mira. "Everyone, this is Vivi," he announced, his smile sharpened for the society pages. But it wasn't Crit's cruelty that knocked the air from the room. It was Lolita, the family matriarch, gliding to the microphone, pearls steady at her throat, prepared to say something that would set the mansion on fire. The envelope was cream, heavy enough to feel expensive and insincere. Mira found it in the metal mailbox of her rented apartment near Solidang, nestled between utility bills and a flyer for a new Pilates studio. Her name was engraved in gold script, Mira Anankai. Above the Radanakarn crest, two stylized elephants flanking a crown caught the light and made her stomach tighten. She held it over the sink as if a shredder lived there, then slid it open anyway. The Radanakarn Foundation Charity Gala, the card announced. To be held at Baan Radanakarn, Charoen Nakhon Road, on Friday at 7 p.m. Dress, formal. An RSVP line, a number, a signature from Lolita Radanakarn herself. Mira set it down, her hands shaking. The mansion faced the Chao Phraya. She used to fall asleep to the river's gossip as long-tail boats chattered past, to the scent of night-blooming jasmine climbing the walls, to the distant hum of the BTS. She'd learned the house's moods, the way teak sang in humidity, how the marble staircase exhaled coolness in April heat, how the mirrors didn't lie as much as people did. She'd left it a year earlier with a single suitcase and a non-disclosure clause that still felt like a gag in her mouth. The divorce had been sealed faster than she could say the words, "I don't." Mira's phone vibrated. Her best friend, Ran, had texted, "You see the invite," followed by a string of siren and popcorn emojis. "Why me?" Mira typed. "It must be a mistake." A pause. Then, "Lolita doesn't make mistakes." Mira walked to the window. Bangkok glowed. She could almost taste the river on the air, thick and metallic. She remembered Lolita's cool hand on hers the day of the wedding. The mother-in-law's smile that felt more like a coronation than a welcome. "You will be safe here," Lolita had said. Safe? Mira laughed softly, startling herself. She tried to bury the card under a stack of old magazines. It bobbed back up in her mind all afternoon while she worked, drafting an open-plan renovation for a café in Ari. She chose chairs, tile, light fixtures, everything a person might need to feel at home. Yet every detail felt like an argument with her past. At dusk, she walked to the Erawan shrine to watch people light incense and pray. She didn't pray. Instead, she counted the steps between herself and the past. 1, 2, grit in sandals. 3, 4, faint street music. 5, 6, the pinch behind her eyes. When her phone buzzed again, she answered without looking. "Hello, Mira," Lolita said, as if they'd never stopped speaking. "I do hope you'll come." The voice reached into Mira's chest and toggled switches she thought she'd taped off. "Why?" "Because there is something you should see," Lolita said, "and something you deserve to hear." "I don't deserve anything from the Radanakarns." "Perhaps not from the Radanakarns," Lolita replied, "but from me." The line went quiet, except for the sound of river traffic bleeding through a distant window. Mira found herself nodding into the phone, the old habit of obedience as unsettling as déjà vu. "I'll come," she said, hating herself a little for it. "Good. Wear the blue dress," Lolita said, then hung up. The blue dress. Mira had left it behind, folded in a wardrobe lined with cedar, smelling of wealth and someone else's life. She pressed her forehead to the cool glass of a display window beside her and watched her reflection flicker in the neon. For a second, she saw a woman who could walk into a mansion without flinching. She went home and pulled a simple black sheath from her closet. On Friday, traffic clenched around the river. Radanackern security guided cars into a procession of wealth. Bentleys, Mercedes, one red Lamborghini that purred like sin. Mira's grab driver whistled. "Big night," he said, eyeing the guard towers, the manicured hedges. She could feel the history pressing against the walls, the former prime ministers, tech moguls, and movie stars who drifted through the foyer, smelling of cologne and concession. She stepped out under a sky gauzed with humidity. The mansion rose like a myth, terraces stacked above the river, windows flooding light onto water so dark it held stars. On the steps, photographers lifted their cameras, unsure. Did they know her? Did they remember the silent divorce, the pictures that never ran? Mira squared her shoulders and walked in. She could do this for one night. She could walk back into the past and behave as if it hadn't nearly destroyed her. At the top of the stairs stood Lolita, elegant in cream silk, her hair silver and immaculate. Her eyes were kind, which upset Mira more than cruelty would have. "You look stronger," Lolita said. "I am." Lolita kissed the air near Mira's cheek. "Good." If this was a trap, it was scented with tuberose and lit by expensive chandeliers. A quartet played in the gallery. Waiters moved like choreography, bearing trays of champagne. From a far archway, voices approached, a swell of laughter, then a familiar timbre Mira felt in her bones. Crit. He emerged arm in arm with a woman who looked like a fashion editorial sharpened into a person. Sleek hair, red mouth, a white silk gown that made a point. Crit's smile widened when he saw Mira. He lifted his glass in a mock salute. "Everyone," he called across the room, the sound system catching his voice. "I want you to meet Vivi Shrisical." Every head turned. Cameras rose like a field of mechanical flowers. Mira's stomach dropped. Lolita's lips barely moved. "Stay," she whispered. "For what comes next?" Mira's mouth smiled without her permission. A survival pose. She accepted a flute of champagne she had no intention of drinking and tracked the choreography of humiliation. Crit led Vivi toward the portrait hall, the route he always took to show newcomers the scale of his inheritance. Ancestral oil paintings, a Warhol gifted to his father, a wall of photographs documenting decades of charity, influence, gossip. Vivi moved with a dancer's awareness of angles. She knew how to find the camera while pretending she didn't. Up close, she was younger than Mira expected, 26 maybe, and beautiful in a brittle way, like glass that had been sandblasted until it shone too much. "Do we know her family?" whispered a woman near Mira, a wife of a shipping magnate. "Shrisical," murmured another, rolling the name around like an unfamiliar wine. "New money, old scandal, I can't place it." "Influencer," a man said, consulting his phone. 400,000 followers, skincare endorsements, a line of swimsuits. Vivi tilted her head and let Crit tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was rehearsed. He'd used it on Mira at their first gala, the night he told her he admired women who built things. Artists, he'd said then, not decorations. The memory burned with its own light. Mira. The sound of her name was like a pebble dropped into a well. Ren materialized at her side, wearing a satin jumpsuit the color of midnight and an expression that could cut marble. "God, are you breathing?" "I think so." "Want me to trip her?" "I wore shoes that could kill a horse." Mira almost laughed. "Not tonight." "Then bury your pain in canapes," Ren advised, snatching a shrimp spoon from a passing tray. "Also, look at Lolita. She's different." Mira did. Lolita stood at the edge of the crowd, not in her accustomed position center, triumphant but slightly aside, eyes narrowed in calculation or worry. She was holding a small stack of papers. Her knuckles were white. Crit drew his circle closer, dispensing anecdotes like party favors. He hadn't changed, still beautiful, still insufferable. A tailored tuxedo, an expensive watch, a face the tabloids loved because it could look gentle in one frame and wolfish in the next. He'd cut his hair shorter. The shadows under his eyes were either fatigue or guilt or a late night with a good bottle of bourbon. He caught Mira watching. His gaze lingered, then flicked over her dress, black, unfussy, an absence of statement. He smirked. "Come," Ren murmured, hooking Mira's arm. "We'll find the safest corner of this ridiculous palace and occupy it until the speeches are over." Speeches, Mira echoed, dread coiling in her chest. Lolita had promised something to hear. Speeches were weapons cleared by caterers. They settled in the shadow of a carved screen near the koi courtyard. Water murmured through the lattice. Beyond, the city glared, high-rises like teeth. Mira let the sound wash over her and tried to slow her heart. "Why would Lolita invite me for this?" she whispered. "To watch him introduce her. To test whether I'll shatter." "Because she's not sentimental," Ren said. "If she wanted to watch you hurt, she could have read the gossip blogs like everyone else." "No, this is strategy. Lolita is a chessboard in heels. She's loyal to her son." "She's loyal to the Radanakarn story," Ren corrected. "Sometimes that's the same thing. Sometimes it isn't." The music paused midair. Someone had cut the quartet's microphones. The room's attention turned like a school of fish. Lolita mounted the low dais. She didn't need to tap the mic. The quiet fell into her hands. "Friends," she said, her voice carrying. "Thank you for coming. Tonight, we raise funds for scholarships and restoration projects along our beloved Chao Phraya. This house has always faced the river. We believe in the current. We believe in bearing witness." A polite chuckle at the metaphor. Crit and Vivi positioned themselves where cameras could catch their profiles and mirror a fantasy. Lolita looked down at her papers, then at the room. For the first time Mira could remember, the matriarch looked human. Not old, never that, but mortal, in the way of anyone with a heart that had been misled. "You all know my son," Lolita continued. "And many of you know Mira, who once shared our name." Head swiveled. Mira felt 100 glances snip at her like blades. "What you do not know," Lolita said, "is what I learned after my husband's death last year. What I have chosen to do with that knowledge, and why tonight matters beyond crystal and flowers." Crit shifted. Vivi's smile wavered. Lolita slid the papers aside as if they offended her and spoke from memory. 30 years ago, I married into a dynasty. I told myself I was choosing love and a future. In truth, I was choosing power because I had known the feeling of powerlessness too intimately. I raised my son inside that story. I taught him how to wear the house like armor. I taught him to smile as if it were a contract. That was my first mistake." Silence fanned out. The koi bubbled, oblivious. "My second mistake," Lolita said, "was believing that suffering could be contained by silence. When I welcomed Mira into this family, I asked her for discretion, for patience, for endurance, the virtues of a quiet woman. She gave them. We did not deserve them." Mira felt the floor tilt. Ren squeezed her hand until her bones protested. Lolita took a breath. "Last month, I concluded a private audit of Radanakarn Holdings and the associated family trust. The findings are grave, misappropriations that began with my late husband and were continued by those who learned only his lessons. Tonight, I am placing the Baan Radanakarn mansion into a cultural trust and endowing it as a public arts and education center. The inaugural director will be Mira Anankai. The room exhaled as one organism. Someone dropped a glass. It shattered like punctuation. Crit's face went colorless, then red. Vivy blinked. Cameras hiccuped, then found their hunger. "Mother," Crit said into the dead hush. "You can't." "I can," Lolita said, and for the first time, her voice had steel in it. "The land title is mine. The trust is mine. This house was never built to be a stage for cruelty." She looked directly at Mira. "Will you take it?" Mira's mouth opened. No sound came out. Then she heard herself say, "If we can make it something that changes the story." "Yes." Ren made an obscene noise of triumph. Laughter rippled, shocked and relieved and savage. Crit stepped forward as if he might take back the air. Vivy swayed, then steadied, her eyes darting to Mira with something like an apology. Lolita nodded once, sharply. "Then let the river hear it." That night became a puncture in time, before and after. Reporters camped at the gates. Commentators on TV spoke of legacies and matriarchal coups. The next morning, Mira woke to a feed full of edits, her face in the corner of thumbnails, red arrows circling Lolita's announcement, Vivy's name tagged in 500,000 speculative captions. She did not read the comments. She made eggs and burned them. She sat on the floor because chairs felt political. Her phone buzzed until she silenced it. At 10 o'clock, a message came from a private number. "Arrival at 11:30. Security will meet you. L." Mira showered. The black dress hung over a chair like a decision. She reached for jeans, then stopped. She put on navy slacks, a white shirt, and sandals that knew how to walk a lot of floors. She tied her hair back. She put 2 pens in her bag and a small notebook, the way she used to when the mansion was a project and not a wound. On the ride over, Bangkok threw its usual theater at her, vendors setting up for lunch, motorbikes braiding through cars, a monk in saffron scanning his phone. The river was bright and mean under a sun that refused to be anything but absolute. At the gate, security waved her in with a kind of reverence that made her uneasy. Lolita waited in the foyer like a queen who'd abdicated and found she preferred it. "You came," she said, as if there had ever been a choice. "You left me little room to refuse. Do you hate me for that?" Mira considered it. "A little." "Good," Lolita said. "Hate keeps us honest." They walked through rooms that had learned Mira's weight years ago. The portrait hall, the library with its ladders like folded insects, the morning room where she and Crit had once eaten mangoes and laughed with their mouths full, gods of the ordinary. Each space breathed a layered story, and Mira felt her body remember where to turn, where to look. She'd interior designed a hotel on Sathorn earlier that year. Its rooms were exquisite but hollow, like a very good lie. The mansion was flawed in ways that made her ache. "What do you want it to be?" Lolita asked. "Not a museum," Mira said. "Alive. A school for kids who don't get to see themselves in rooms like this, residencies for artists, workshops, a place where people make things and then make something of themselves. And free to anyone under 18. Lolita's smile tilted. "You've thought about this. And you've forgotten that I did." Mira traced the edge of a table with her finger. "How long have you been planning this for me?" "Since I realized I owed you more than an apology," Lolita said. "Since I found the numbers I couldn't unsee. Since I understood my own mother's voice in my head, telling me to be brave for once." They stood at a window. The river flashed like a blade. "How deep is it?" Mira asked, not about the water. "Deep," Lolita said. "There will be consequences. You will be blamed. I will be vilified. Crit will thrash. Has he ever not?" Lolita's mouth pressed thin. "He is my son. He is also a man who walked me to the edge of invisibility," Mira said, sharper than she meant to. He loved me in the way a house loves a painting because it makes the house look good. Lolita's eyes flicked to Mira's face and away. And Vivi? I don't know her, Mira said. She is a person, not a symbol. Good, Lolita said. Hold to that. Symbols invite cruelty. They turned down the servants' corridor, narrow and practical, hidden behind a velvet-draped door. This was Mira's favorite part of the house, its bones visible, its intent honest. The kitchens hummed. The chef, Kun Samchai, looked up and burst into tears at the sight of Mira, then feigned an allergy and barked instructions so no one would see him wipe his eyes. She laughed and let him feed her a spoonful of something miraculous. In the gallery, the Warhol seemed to smirk. Crit's darlings do that. The coy courtyard shimmered, ignoring human melodrama. Mira let herself imagine children sprawled on the tiles, sketching the fish, a poet reading under the eaves while rain hammered the river. Will Crit fight you? She asked. Yes, Lolita said. And I will fight him back in the only way he understands, law and attention. I've already executed the transfer. The board of the new trust meets Monday at 9 o'clock. You will be named director, pending your acceptance. Pending? Mira repeated. Acceptance felt like a word with doors. Also, Lolita added almost casually, we will need to talk about the audit. Mira raised an eyebrow. How bad? Bad enough to make enemies, Lolita said. Bad enough that what I did last night was not only right, but necessary. I have never been brave, Mira. I decided to start. We may both learn how, Mira said. They paused in the shadow of the grand staircase. Footsteps clattered, a staccato unfitting the choreography of the house. Crit appeared, tie loosened, eyes violent with the sheen of someone who has been told no for the first time in years. So this is the rescue, he said, his voice echoing. You take my house and hand it to my ex-wife like a party favor. It was never your house, Lolita said mildly. And Mira is not a party favor. What is she then? Crit asked, turning the full wattage of his attention on Mira. A saint? A martyr? The press seems to think so. I suppose congratulations are in order. Mira met his gaze. Don't make me your story anymore. My story, he barked a laugh. My story is a ledger. My story is a board meeting. My story is watching you leave because I was too proud to ask you to stay. The sentence cut the air. Lolita looked away. Crit's jaw worked as if chewing regret. Vivi is waiting in the car, he said, as if that explained anything. She asked me to tell you she didn't know you'd be here. Of course she didn't, Mira said dryly. You don't know her, he snapped. And you never knew me, Mira said softly. Lolita stepped between them, not as a referee, but as a tide. Enough. There is work to do. You may join us, Crit, if you intend to build instead of destroy. He stared at his mother, at the house that had conferred meaning like a title, at the woman he'd hurt with precision. For a heartbeat, Mira saw the boy in him, the child who'd chased the gardener's cat with a feather on a string, who'd fallen asleep in the library with a book open like a tent on his chest. He turned and left without another word. Lolita exhaled. He is not used to losing. Perhaps he will survive it, Mira said. Perhaps he will become better, Lolita replied. Mira did not say what she thought. People do not become better because losing teaches them. They become better if they choose to be. Still, in the echoing silence, possibility flapped its wings. 3 days later, Vivi asked to meet. The request came through Ren, who had no patience for theatrics and even less for young women who built careers on the friction of their lips. She says it's important, Ren reported, unimpressed. She says it's about you, me, and Lolita. Then we should hear her out, Mira surprised herself. Tell her to pick the place. Fine, Ren said. But if she tries to sell you collagen gummies, I'm calling the police. They met at a tea room on succumbent with rattan chairs and ceiling fans that spun as if the 1970s were still a kind of promise. Vivi arrived precisely on time, wearing a navy dress that could pass for modest if you didn't know how to read seams. She took off her sunglasses. Without the armor of optics, she looked smaller. Thank you for seeing me, she said to Mira. To Ren, she offered a tentative smile. I follow you, she added, which made Ren's eyebrows teleport. Okay, Ren said. Don't. They sat. Vivi folded and unfolded her hands. The nails were perfect. The cuticles told another story. I didn't know about the announcement, she began. Crit told me we were attending a gala. He said it would be a good moment to formalize things. I didn't mean to, she swallowed. I'm not your enemy. Mira regarded her. Then what are you? Vivi's eyes flicked to the server, then back. I'm someone who knows how quickly the ground moves under your feet when powerful men get involved. It was not the line Mira expected. She leaned back. Go on. I grew up in Udon Thani, Vivi said. My mother runs a shop. My father left when I was 12. When I got to Bangkok, I thought if I worked hard and kept my head, I could build something that would keep us safe. The internet loved me for a while. Then it didn't. Then Crit did. And when someone like Crit loves you, he moves you into rooms your body doesn't recognize as rooms. They feel like stages. Like traps with flowers. Ren's expression shaded from skeptical to something begrudgingly sympathetic. I'm not innocent, Vivi continued. I like the clothes. I like the photographs. But I also know debt, and not just the financial kind. I know what it feels like to have a manager who thinks he owns your face. When Lolita made her announcement, I saw him planning how to make me the villain to sell the story. I don't want that story. What do you want? Mira asked. Out, Vivi said simply. And to tell you something you should know before journalists spin it into acid. She lowered her voice. Crit didn't invite you to the gala. Lolita did, without telling him. She set him up to feel the humiliation you've been eating for a year. That shock wasn't an accident. It was theater. She knew the cameras would be there. She knew you'd stand up straighter than anyone else in the room. She knew you'd say yes. Mira absorbed the words like a bruise from the press of a finger typewriting but clarifying. Why are you telling me this? Because choosing sides is usually about choosing your future self, Vivi said. I don't want to be the woman who watched another woman get used as a narrative. Not again. Ren drew in a breath like a string pulled on a kite. Mira watched Vivi's hands, how they trembled just slightly, how she stilled them by pressing them against the teacup. Fear makes a person precise. Also, Vivi added, someone is feeding details of Lolita's audit to a rival conglomerate. There's going to be a leak. Your name will be in it. They'll frame you as the beneficiary of stolen money, the face of hypocrisy. You have maybe 3 days. How do you know this? Ren demanded, all edges. Because my manager works with their PR firm, Vivi said. He thinks I'm too distracted by love to listen when men talk shop near me. He's wrong. Mira felt the room zoom and retract. The fans spun. The afternoon leaned toward rain. What do you want in exchange for this? A job, Vivi said, surprising them both. Receptionist, social media lead, a person who answers the phone at the news center and tells girls from Udon Thani that they belong in houses like that. Pay me fairly. Put my name on the bottom of things, not the top. Ren blinked, then made a face Mira couldn't categorize. Mira considered the ask's audacity and humility, the way it contained a map away from shame. She thought of the foyer, of children climbing the staircase and seeing their reflections in the mirrors and not flinching. "Okay," Mira said, "if Lolita agrees." Vivi's relief was almost ugly raw, unrehearsed. She nodded, then smiled, and for the first time, her face looked like a person's, not a billboard's. "Thank you," she said. Also, she hesitated, Crit is not a monster. "No," Mira said. "He's worse. He's a person who believes the world forgives him because he apologizes with flowers." Vivi swallowed. "He apologized to me with a necklace. It made a bruise. I told him it didn't fit. He laughed and told me it would if I learned how to wear it." Mira looked at Ren. Ren's jaw had set like concrete. "We'll prepare for the leak," Mira said. "And if you want out, we'll help you. But understand, stepping into this will make you a target of new people." "I understand," Vivi said. "People like stories more than they like people." They finished their tea. Outside, rain began, blunt and cleansing. Vivi lifted her umbrella with a little flourish, as if practicing the choreography of another life. The leak hit a day early. A business site with a reputation for speed over nuance dropped a headline that climbed into every feed: Radanackern audit reveals art center gift tied to misappropriated funds. A photo of Lolita, lips compressed. A photo of Mira mid-blink, as if captured choosing silence. The article connected dots that did not connect, suggested crimes in the negative space of facts, and left room for the commentariat to pour in their poison. By noon, a reporter camped outside Mira's apartment and yelled questions in English and Thai. "Did you know? Were you complicit? Is this revenge? Are you still in love with him?" The last question stung most for its laziness. Lolita's call came, short and clipped. "They have a copy of page 7, she said. "Only page 7. Sloppy. We will release the full report." "Will it make things better?" Mira asked. "It will make them true," Lolita said. "Truth doesn't trend." "Then we will learn to be boring," Lolita replied with acid. Ren orchestrated a statement. "We do not litigate in the press," it read, "but we will publish the full, independent, and unedited audit on Monday for public review. The Radanackern Cultural Trust stands by its mission to serve the people of Bangkok." "Good," Lolita said when she read it. "Now, call the lawyer." They gathered in Lolita's study, Lolita, Mira, Ren, a white-haired attorney named Ajarn Precha who looked like he'd been born reading contracts, and an accountant with the unnerving calm of someone who loved numbers more than people. On the table were stacks of paper, humming laptops, and a bowl of mangosteen no one touched. Precha explained the mechanics of grief disguised as finance. Your husband obscured cash flows through shell entities. Your son authorized transfers he understood poorly or chose not to understand. The auditors have traced the funds. The cultural trust is clean. The endowment is clean. But the narrative, he spread his hands, is not. Mira listened, taking notes in a handwriting her high school teachers had praised as scholarly. She drew a river where the ledger should have been, with arrows indicating the current. "What happens to Crit?" she asked. "Consequences," Precha said simply. "Legal, reputational. He may be asked to step back from the company. He may blame you because he cannot reach his father." "He already blames me," Mira said. "He blamed me for leaving before he hit bottom, as if staying longer would have slowed gravity." Lolita closed her eyes for a second. "I will speak to him." "Let me," Mira said. Silence performed its trick of gathering and compressing. "Are you sure?" Lolita asked. "No," Mira admitted. "But I don't want to build the future in this house with someone else's unfinished sentence gagging me." She texted Crit. "Meet me at the Koi courtyard at 6. He responded with a single K that somehow carried all the contempt of a novel. At 5:50, the courtyard glowed with the forgiving light of early evening. The koi moved like gentle gossip. Crit arrived late, wearing bottled green anger disguised as cologne. You wanted a show, he said. You got one. I wanted a life, Mira said. But I'm good at shows. What happened to the boy who loved building boats out of driftwood and floating them on the river? He drowned, Crit said too quickly. You drowned him, Mira corrected, almost kindly. He paced. I did what I was taught. Keep the stock price sleek. Keep the tabloids close. Keep the truth in a room with no windows. And now my mother uses my ex-wife to humiliate me, he spat. Mira let the word hang. Humiliation is a feeling, not a fact. The fact is you signed things you didn't read because you were bored by the idea of the future not loving you. He flinched minor, but real. I loved you, he said suddenly, as if the confession could reset time. You loved the idea of you that existed in my eyes, Mira said. That is different. He stopped pacing. The air felt thick with river breath and panic. What do you want from me? An apology? A speech? To step aside and watch you turn my house into a school for children who will grow up to critique my taste. I want you to stop trying to win, Mira said. Winning is what broke you. Help us build this so it doesn't break anyone else. And if I don't? Then you will continue to be the man who stands in beautiful rooms and feels nothing. He swallowed. For the first time, he looked smaller than the house. My mother chose you. She chose the house, Mira said. She chose a story that could survive her. You can be part of it, or you can keep auditioning for a part in a play no one wants to watch. He stared at the fish. Vivi says I'm not a monster. She is kinder than you deserve, Mira said. Help her leave. He looked at her then, sharply. You spoke to her. She spoke to me. She asked for a job. I said maybe. He laughed once, hollow. Of course you did. Of course you turn enemies into employees. People into people, Mira corrected. Try it. He ran a hand through his hair, an old gesture that had once charmed her. Now it looked like someone searching for a door in a wall. Fine, he said at last. I will not interfere with the trust. I will issue a statement. I will step back from the board while the audit is addressed. The words sounded like they'd been taught to him phonetically. But if this house becomes a monument to hating me. It won't, Mira said. We're building it for people who don't know your name. He gave her a look she couldn't read, then nodded once, as if agreeing with a judge. Be careful, he added, lower. My father had friends who never learned how to lose. They will come for you because you look like a door they can slam. Mira felt a flicker in her ribs. Not fear, not courage, a coiled combination. Then we will learn how to stay open without being broken. They moved fast. The trust hired a security consultant who walked the perimeter and pronounced it arrogantly penetrable. Cameras went up. Access lists tightened. Lolita's driver learned to weave routes that didn't repeat. Mira's phone number changed. Ren ran comms like a war room, issuing statements before rumors sprouted legs. They set the first public event, an open day for neighborhood schools with hands-on art stations, music workshops, and a reading by a young novelist whose first book had made grandmothers cry on the BTS. The announcement was a dare and an invitation. 2 nights before the event, a fire started in the gallery. Smoke triggered the alarms, and the mansion's belly convulsed with sirens. The sprinkler system, old and dignified and never asked to do much, equipped and then remembered its duty. Water fell. Paintings shuddered under their protective glass like saints behind blizzards. Mira arrived to chaos, security shouting, staff hauling hoses, Kun Sanchai swearing in beautiful cursive. The fire was small, contained to a spotlight that had been jimmied into malfunction. Sabotage, the consultant said later, pointing at a tampered switch. Crit appeared, breathless, shirt unbuttoned, hair wild. He barreled past the consultant, past security, past caution, and went straight for the switchboard like a man who had grown up in the walls of the house and knew where its veins ran. He cut power to the gallery with a slap that echoed. The room exhaled smoke. The fire died in a hiss and a sulk. He turned to Mira, eyes rimmed in ash. "You cannot be casual about the physics of electricity," he said, as if they were back in the early days, teaching each other how to live in the same sentence. She wanted, absurdly, to laugh. She wanted to forgive him for being a competent human in a crisis. She wanted to hate him for arriving like a hero in a story he'd written. "Thank you," she said instead, and meant it. Lolita stood in the doorway, one hand on the frame, watching her son move through the smoke like he had found a reason to belong. He looked up at his mother. Their eyes met. Something complicated rippled between them, a pattern that had begun decades earlier, too elaborate to unravel tonight. The consultant pulled Mira aside. "We will find out who did this. It may be someone inside." "Inside," she repeated, nausea pitching. "Leverage is easiest when it wears a familiar face," he said. "Be careful with your trust." The next morning, the rival site ran a piece implying the fire was staged for sympathy. Comments bloomed with glee. Vivi texted Ren screenshots of messages from her manager, "We can blame Mira. Victim storyline sells." Ren typed back, "Try it and see how fast we make your hairline recede." She didn't hit send. She sent an emoji of a shovel instead, which was somehow more menacing. They did not cancel the open day. They doubled the volunteers. They printed maps. They hired a band from Thornbury who played a joyful noise that made reporters begrudgingly smile. Children arrived in clumps, hands sticky with mango, eyes huge. Mira watched a girl in a school uniform stand before the war hall and tilt her head in a gesture so precise it felt like prayer. Vivi worked the entrance table with efficiency and a new kind of prettinessless shine, more welcome. She directed families to the workshops and told the boys trying to impress her that the clay studio needed sturdy hands. They glowed under the assignment. Midday, a rainstorm peeled across the river like a curtain. For a moment, everyone gathered under the portico, laughing at how strangers become an instant community when forced to share the mist. Lolita, her hair frizzing in rebellion, laughed with them. The house felt relieved, busy, purposeful, uncruel. Then a man stepped out from the cluster of parents near the koi courtyard and moved toward Mira with the kind of focus that made her skin crawl. He wore a maintenance shirt that didn't hang like it belonged to him. He smiled, unconvincing. "Miss Mira," he said, "too familiar. The consultant asked me to show you something in the service corridor." Every muscle in Mira's body learned to listen at once. "What's your name?" she asked, stalling. "Lek," he said, a name convenient for a liar. "Lek what?" He hesitated. The rain pounded. Kun Samchai, carrying a tray of watermelon, saw the fractal of alarm blossom across Mira's face and changed course with a pivot that would make ballerinas jealous. He reached her just as the man's hand went to his pocket. Samchai body-checked him like a rugby player. The tray went flying. A constellation of fruit. Ren shouted. Security surged. In the scuffle, something small skittered across the tiles, metal glinting. A pocket knife, sharp and wrong in a house full of children. They took the man away, his protestations ugly with the panic of a failed errand. The police came, already briefed. The consultant looked disgusted in a professional way. Mira exhaled shakily. Lolita's hand found her elbow, an anchor. "I'm sorry." "This is not your fault," Mira said, not entirely believing herself. Crit stood at the edge of the chaos, fists clenched, eyes scanning for more danger. He walked to Mira as if through molasses. This is because of me, he said, not as vanity but as arithmetic. Because my father owed favors. Because I learned his math. Then unlearn it, Mira said. He nodded, a quick jerk, pain cracking through. I will speak, he said. Publicly. I will say what my father did, and what I did, and what we will do now. Lolita's breath hitched. Are you sure? No, he said, but I am tired of drowning. The press conference felt like a funeral for a story. They set it in a neutral hotel ballroom with carpet designed to hide stains and history. The microphones multiplied like anxious rabbits. Reporters sharpened their questions with stainless smiles. Crit stood at the podium in a suit that looked suddenly less like armor. Lolita sat at a small table to his right, Mira to his left, ran a half-step behind with a pen like a blade. Vivi stood in the back, anonymous, eyes rimmed with quiet pride. Thank you for coming, Crit began, his voice steady with effort. I am here to say what I should have said a year ago. I signed documents I did not fully understand. I defended practices I should have questioned. I blamed others for consequences that were mine. I am stepping back from Radonacron Holdings, pending an independent review. I support the Cultural Trust and its mission. He paused, then did something rare. He looked straight at the cameras and let the room see him as a person, not a brand. My father taught me that admitting weakness is worse than failure, he said. He was wrong. I have been wrong. I am sorry. Questions detonated. He took them. He did not dodge. When a reporter tried to goad him into calling Mira a social climber, he said, Mira was the only adult in this house for too long. When another asked whether Vivi had replaced Mira in his heart, he said, no one replaces anyone. That math makes people disposable. When a third suggested the fire was an inside job, he said, we are cooperating fully with the police. We will not let our fear make us liars. It was a good performance that flirted with being more than a performance. Lolita's hands relaxed in her lap. Ren's pen stopped moving. Afterward, in the hotel's service corridor where events dropped their adrenaline, Crit sagged against a wall and slid down to a crouch, heedless of the carpet. Mira crouched with him, the way people who have survived the same storm sometimes do. I didn't say everything, he murmured. You said enough. He made a small sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. Do you think I can be different? I think you can try, Mira said. Trying isn't a personality. It's a daily chore. He nodded, absurdly grateful for the mundanity of the metaphor. Vivi is leaving her manager, he said. She asked me for help. I signed the letter. I didn't tell her what to do. Good, Mira said. She can tell herself. He exhaled. Do you remember the day we moved into the mansion? You carried a box labeled small, fragile things and told me that if we broke anything, it meant we were living. We broke a lot, Mira said. Maybe we're alive, he said, tentative. Maybe, she allowed. He looked at her then, not as a claim, but as a witness. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't know how to give it yet, she said. But I know how to work with you on Tuesdays at 9 o'clock. Tuesdays at 9 o'clock, he repeated, as if scheduling could save him. They stood. The future didn't become light, but it stepped out of the dark. The Cultural Trust opened quietly, which is to say loudly in a city that hungers for places to send its children when the rain is stubborn. Classes filled. A sculptor from Chiang Mai led workshops in the courtyard and told stories about clay that made the parents sigh with longing. A rapper from Bangkok ran a lyric lab that produced a chorus so fierce the birds fell silent to listen. A retired architect taught kids to draw houses that would not hurt them. Mira found herself walking the house at night after everyone had gone, touching walls as if checking for a fever. She learned which rooms needed fans at midnight and which needed prayers at dawn. She hired staff who didn't apologize for being excellent. She put Vivy at the front desk and watched the girl become a woman who knew how to say, welcome, so it felt like mercy. Lolita joined an English class one morning and struggled with irregular verbs like a teenager. She sat with a little boy who had drawn a house with 1,000 windows. So many eyes, she said, smiling. So many ways to let the light in. The police traced the attempted knife attack and the sabotage spotlight to a subcontractor with ties to a rival conglomerate. The man in the maintenance shirt entered a plea that contained no contrition. The rival site ran a retraction buried under an ad for a luxury watch. One evening, during the cool hour when the river looks like it has forgiven the day, Crit arrived carrying a cardboard box. It was labeled in his handwriting, small, fragile things. I found it in the attic, he said. I thought it was lost. Inside was a ceramic fish Mira had made the first week of their marriage at a pottery class in Thongler, a Polaroid of both of them making faces, a dried jasmine garland so delicate it could have turned to dust if she breathed wrong. She held the fish and felt the old ache like a familiar weather system. She did not look at the Polaroid. She handed it back. You keep it, she said. For the records. Records, he echoed, as if the word could carry them without drowning. They stood on the terrace and watched a barge move upstream, impossibly slow and determined. The sky performed its nightly miracle. Mira felt a peculiar gratitude for everything not healed. Do you ever think about children? Crit asked suddenly, and then winced. God, I'm sorry. That's... Yes, Mira said, surprising herself. I think about children in rooms that treat them like guests instead of owners. I think about gardens with dirt they can ruin. I think about telling them the truth while it still matters. He breathed out. I didn't know how to tell the truth without making myself the hero. You could start by telling it so someone else becomes the hero, Mira said. He looked at her. You should write a book. I'm busy making a house, she said. He smiled, the real one that didn't know how to pose. You always were. On the morning of the trust's first anniversary, the river flooded its banks just enough to be playful. Children squealed. Parents panicked and then laughed. Volunteers passed out towels. The city felt like it might be kind on purpose. In the afternoon, Lolita called everyone into the gallery, which now held rotating exhibitions by artists who'd never stepped into a gallery before. This house taught them how to walk. I have one more announcement, she said, her voice strong. I'm stepping down as chair of the board. Our new chair will be Ren. Ren, who had not dressed for a coronation, swore softly and then covered it with a cough. The room cheered. Lolita hugged her like a queen ceding a throne to the only person she trusted to burn it down if needed. And, Lolita added quieter, I am starting a scholarship fund in the name of my mother, who sold noodles by the river and taught me that the opposite of fear is not courage. It is care. People cried. It was that kind of day. At dusk, Mira walked to the river alone and watched a long-tail boat weave through reflections. The house behind her buzzed with the low hum of generational shift. She thought of the girl she had been 25, terrified and brave, stepping into a mansion that mistook its mirrors for eyes. You did it, Vivy said, appearing with 2 paper cups of iced tea. We're doing it, Mira corrected. Vivy clinked her cup against Mira's. To not being anyone's symbol, she said. To building rooms where girls become women without apologizing for taking up space, Mira said. To children who draw houses with 1,000 windows, Vivy added. They drank. The river decided, as it always does, to keep moving. Redemption rarely arrives with trumpets. It comes as a Tuesday at 9 a.m. when the photocopier works. It comes as an email from a mother who writes, my daughter didn't speak in class until your poetry workshop. Now she won't stop. It comes as Crit sitting in a support group in a church basement on Sathorn, learning how to speak about harm without auditioning for applause. He joined the center as a volunteer one day a week under Ren's skeptical eye. He taught a class on reading contracts to young artists who might otherwise sign away their souls for exposure. He did not flirt with the mothers. He made tea badly. He learned how to put chairs away. He apologized without making it the story's climax. One evening after class, he found Mira repairing a wobbly table with a hex key and a grim expression. "Here," he said, holding the table steady while she tightened it. The intimacy was homely and unheroic, which made it safe. "Remember the necklace?" he asked suddenly, his voice low. "I thought giving gold was generosity. I did not notice the bruise." "You notice now?" Mira said. "I'm learning how to see," he replied. They did not fall back in love. They fell into something better, a scaffolding that held them in the same weather without insisting they share a roof. When he laughed, she didn't guard her smile. When she cried, he did not try to fix it with diamonds. He bought more hex keys. Lolita found a softness that did not weaken her. She took the skitran alone, sometimes, standing with the teenagers and the aunties, learning how the city breathes when no one is watching. She flirted with a painter who wore his hair in a knot and called her ma'am, because respect is a language you can choose to learn at any age. Vivi built a youth program for girls from upcountry provinces. She taught them how to hold a camera so it didn't hold them. She stood beside them when their mothers hesitated and said, "I will walk with her until you can't imagine her walking without you." Ren became a board chair you could mistake for a dragon. She breathed fire when needed and warmed her hands at it the rest of the time. She had business cards printed that read "Ringleader," and handed them out at meetings with scandalized donors. Donations increased. As for Mira, she learned to be the kind of director who understood pencils and politics, who knew how to answer an email at 3 a.m. without making it someone else's emergency, who remembered birthdays, who remembered to eat. She taught a small class on rooms that don't hurt, inviting kids to bring photographs of places they loved and explain why. A girl brought a picture of her grandmother's kitchen. A boy brought the alley behind his apartment where the light did a specific thing at 4:15. They wrote essays about air. On an ordinary afternoon, a woman approached Mira in the foyer and said without preamble, "I divorced a Ratana something, too. Your house made me think I could breathe without begging permission." They laughed, then cried, then made plans to start a support group called X's and Access, because jokes are architecture, too. The mansion settled into itself like a body that had recovered from an illness and suddenly remembered hunger. The koi grew fat on dropped crackers. The war hall looked less smug, surrounded by paintings by 13-year-olds with broken hearts and enormous talent. The staircase learned the names of people who would never have been permitted to leave fingerprints before. The staff's laughter seeped into the teak, which is how you heal a house. On the second anniversary of the Cultural Trust, the river swelled in a way that made headlines, and then withdrew, embarrassed. That night, the house glowed, the city's salt. Mira stood on the terrace with Lolita and watched fireworks someone else paid for bloom over the water. Crit leaned on the railing a careful distance away. Vivi filmed the sky for girls upcountry who would watch tomorrow on cracked phones and feel like they had been invited anyway. "Do you forgive me?" Lolita asked quietly, her eyes on the light. Mira considered. "Forgiveness is not a switch. It is a tide. I forgive you for some of the rooms," she said. "I am still finding the lights in others." "That seems fair," Lolita said. They stood until the fireworks ended and the river remembered how to be a mirror. A breeze lifted the scent of jasmine. Somewhere inside, a child shouted, "Again." And an adult said, "Tomorrow." "Tomorrow," Mira echoed. If you felt this story in your chest, the way the river presses against its banks, if you've ever stood in a beautiful room and wondered who you had to be to belong there, then you know why Mira kept showing up. You know why Lolita chose courage too late, but still chose it. Why Crit learned to apologize without turning it into theater. And why Vivi walked herself out of someone else's narrative and into her own. Stories like this don't end, they widen. So, if you want to see more houses turned into havens, more mothers unlearn fear, and more exes become better ancestors than partners, hit that like button. Share this with someone who needs a way out, and subscribe for the next tale. Drop your thoughts below. Which moment changed your mind? Which character surprised you? Your comments aren't just engagement, they're blueprints for the next room we'll build together. See you in the next chapter.